In today's video, I'm going to tell you a story that begins with a moment so small, so simple, that none of us imagined it would end up changing our entire family forever. It all started with a surprise, something my mom had been planning quietly, almost secretly, for weeks. At first, it felt like one of those wholesome family gestures, the kind of thing you smile about and forget later. But what she revealed, what she brought into the light that day, uncovered truths none of us were prepared to face. And once those truths came out, there was no going back. I remember the exact morning it began. The kitchen smelled like freshly baked bread, sunlight was spilling across the table, and everything looked normal, so normal it almost felt staged. My mom moved around with an energy I hadn't seen in years, humming softly, adjusting little things as if she was waiting for the right moment. You know that strange tension where you can feel something big is coming, but no one has said it yet? That was the air in our home that day. And even though I couldn't explain why, my stomach tightened with a feeling I couldn't shake. That's the thing about family stories, they don't always start with drama. Sometimes they start with a smile, a quiet room, or a small surprise. But behind that surprise, hidden beneath the excitement, there can be secrets tied to infidelity, betrayal, and choices that ripple through generations. And my mom's surprise, what she chose to reveal, held all of that. Before I share what she said, you need to understand who my mother was to us. She wasn't perfect, but she was the glue in our home. The peacekeeper. The one who always knew when someone was hurting, even if they didn't say a word. For years, she carried the weight of our family on her shoulders, and most of the time, we didn't even realize it. She pushed aside her own disappointments, her own heartbreak, just to make sure we didn't fall apart. So when she stood there that day, hands shaking slightly, eyes shining with something between fear and determination, we knew this wasn't some small announcement. My father sat quietly at the table, pretending to scroll through his phone but clearly watching her from the corner of his eye. They had been distant for a long time, the kind of distance you can feel even when two people are sitting right next to each other. We grew used to it. The silent dinners, the polite conversations, the way they avoided each other's gaze. But that morning, for the first time in a long time, Dad looked nervous. Like he knew something was about to surface, something he couldn't control or hide from anymore. Then Mom finally spoke. Her voice was steady, but it carried a strange heaviness, like she had replayed this moment 1,000 times in her head before choosing the right words. She said she had a surprise, something she'd wanted to share for years, but was too scared to confront. At first, she smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked at me, then at my father, and said, "It's time." Just those two words, "it's time." And everything inside me froze. Because surprises don't usually come with that kind of finality. They don't make the room go silent. They don't make your father drop his phone like it suddenly weighed 100 pounds. But this one did. She reached into a drawer, pulled out a small envelope, and placed it between us on the table. My father shifted, clearing his throat, pretending not to know what it was, but the fear in his eyes told a different story. My mom didn't look at him. She just stared at the envelope as if the truth inside it had been following her for years. She said the envelope held answers about loyalty, betrayal, and the real reason our family had slowly been drifting apart. She said it would hurt, but hiding the truth had hurt her even more. She said what was inside would finally explain everything. At that moment, my heart started beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. The room felt smaller. My father's face went pale. And my mom, she just waited. Calm. Almost too calm. But before she opened the envelope, before she revealed what she had discovered, she said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. She said, "After today, nothing in this family will ever be the same." And that's when everything changed. The shock that followed. The confrontation that exploded. The confessions we never expected. All of it unfolded because of that one surprise. And in the next part, I'll show you exactly what was inside that envelope and why it turned our family upside down. My mom's fingers rested on the envelope for a long moment, almost like she was gathering the courage to reopen a wound she had tried to heal quietly for years. But she didn't open it yet. Instead, she took a slow breath and sat down across from us, her eyes softening in a way that made me realize this wasn't a sudden decision. This surprise, this truth, had been heavy on her heart for a long time. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to know what our family had been living through in the years leading up to it. On the outside, we looked like a normal household, busy schedules, quiet dinners, weekend routines. But underneath that routine was a growing distance, something none of us talked about but all of us felt. It started subtly. My parents stopped laughing together. They stopped sharing their little inside jokes. They didn't argue, but silence can be louder than shouting when so much remains unsaid. My mom had always been the one who tried to keep the peace, who believed that families survive by communicating. But somewhere along the way, my dad began drifting. Not physically, he was home every night, but emotionally. He became guarded, distracted. His phone, once left anywhere, was suddenly always face down, always in his pocket, always locked. It wasn't enough to accuse him of anything, but it was enough to make Mom's instincts whisper that something wasn't right. She tried to brush it off at first. People change. Work gets stressful. Life gets heavy. But the small signs kept piling up, the unexplained messages he deleted, the late-night calls he stepped outside to answer, the moments when he would look at her as if he was hiding a different version of himself behind tired eyes. She asked him gently a few times if something was wrong, and he always said no. But the discomfort in his voice didn't match the words. And then there was the night that changed everything for her. A night she rarely talked about, but one she never forgot. She told me later that she had walked into the living room and found him staring at his phone with an expression she'd never seen before, something between guilt and panic. When he realized she was there, he quickly put the phone away and forced a smile. She didn't question him then. But from that night forward, she began paying attention. Quietly, carefully. Not because she wanted to catch him in anything, but because she needed to understand what was happening to the man she had spent her life with. The man she trusted. And eventually, the clues she gathered, tiny, overlooked details, led her to something she never expected. Something that made her doubt everything she thought she knew about her marriage. Something that pushed her to prepare the envelope now sitting on our kitchen table. But before she revealed what she had discovered, before she opened the envelope and let the truth out into the open, she looked at my father and asked him one question. A question that made the room go completely still. Do you want to tell them yourself, or should I? The answer he gave next changed everything. My father didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the envelope, almost as if he hoped it would disappear if he stayed silent long enough. The tension in the room shifted, thick, heavy, almost suffocating. I could feel something breaking in the air, something that had been fragile for years, but was only now beginning to show its cracks. When he finally lifted his head, his voice came out low and unsteady, the kind of voice someone uses when they know their truth is about to catch up with them. But instead of explaining anything, he whispered, "What did you tell them?" It wasn't a denial. It wasn't confusion. It was fear. And that fear only made everything worse. My mom didn't react with anger or even sadness. She just sat there quietly, studying him like she was seeing the real version of him for the first time in a long time. That silence between them, tight, emotional, filled with years of unanswered questions, became its own kind of confession. The conflict didn't stop at their marriage. It stretched into the whole family. I found myself thinking back on moments that now felt different. The times my mother cried quietly in the bathroom, the evenings my father stayed out longer than usual, the tension that filled the house even when no one said a word. It made me wonder how many times I had walked past signs without noticing, how often I had mistaken distance for simple exhaustion. But the real twist wasn't just between them. There were other layers, subplots that had been building quietly around us. My aunt had been visiting our house more often lately, slipping into conversations with strange hints and unfinished sentences. My older brother had been suspicious too, asking questions my mom avoided answering. Everyone seemed to know a piece of something, but no one knew the whole truth. And still, the envelope remained closed. My father leaned back, defeated, as if he already knew what was coming. My mom's expression softened for a second, almost like she was mourning the man he used to be. Then she lifted the envelope again, her fingers trembling just slightly. "Then I'll tell them," she said softly. But before she could open it, there was a knock at the door. A knock none of us were expecting. And whoever was on the other side was about to make the truth even more complicated. The knock echoed through the house like a warning. All three of us froze, our eyes shifting toward the front door as if the sound itself carried another secret we weren't ready for. My mom lowered the envelope slowly, her expression tightening. My dad looked even more nervous now, glancing between the door and the envelope as though he knew exactly who might be standing outside. And for a moment, I wondered if this knock was connected to everything she had discovered, another piece of the truth waiting to spill out. No one moved at first. It was the kind of hesitation that happens when a single moment threatens to flip everything upside down. When the knock came again, firmer this time, my mom finally stood up. Her steps were cautious, like she was walking toward something she had predicted but hoped would never arrive. My father didn't follow her. He stayed seated, hands clasped tightly together, breathing unevenly. That alone made the tension double. When my mom opened the door, I could only see the shadow of the person standing outside. A familiar figure, but one whose presence didn't make sense in that moment. My mom stepped back slightly surprised, but not in the relieved way someone reacts to an unexpected friend or neighbor. This was something else, something heavier. She didn't invite them in right away, which only made the silence more intense. My dad stood up then, almost stumbling, as if his worst fear had just shown up on our doorstep. He whispered something under his breath, too low for me to catch, but the look on his face said enough. Whoever was at the door wasn't just connected to the secret. This person might have been part of it. The visitor's voice was calm, but carried a weight that settled sharply between all of us. "We need to talk," they said. All of us. My mom hesitated, then slowly stepped aside to let them in. The moment they walked into our living room, the air shifted. My father's shoulders tensed. My heart pounded. And the envelope, still unopened, lay on the table like a fuse waiting to be lit. As the visitor took a seat, their eyes moved from my mother to my father, then finally to me. What they were about to say would push us right to the edge of the truth. And it was clear that once they started talking, there would be no going back. The visitors sat down slowly, their posture tense, as if they had rehearsed this moment, but still weren't ready to face it. My mom stayed standing behind the chair, one hand resting on the backrest like she needed something steady to hold onto. My father, pale and visibly shaken, lowered himself back into his seat. The envelope still lay on the table untouched, but now it felt like only one of several ticking bombs in the room. The visitor took a deep breath before speaking. "Before anything else comes out," they said, looking directly at my father, "you need to tell them the truth. All of it. Because if you don't, I will." My father closed his eyes for a moment, as if the words physically hit him. My mom didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked exhausted, like this was something she had been piecing together for a long time. But I could feel my own confusion growing stronger. What truth was big enough to involve someone outside our home? What secret needed both an envelope and a witness? Just when I thought the tension couldn't get thicker, the visitor revealed something none of us expected. They reached into their bag and pulled out a small folder. Not an envelope like my mom's, but something heavier, filled with papers, receipts, messages, things that looked painfully real. They placed it next to my mom's envelope, as if matching her revelation with one of their own. "There's more you don't know," they said quietly. "And you deserve to understand the full picture." My mom stiffened at those words. Even she didn't know what was inside the folder. My father's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face for the first time. Whatever was in that folder wasn't just connected to the secret she had uncovered, it was something deeper. The visitor continued, their voice steady but full of strain. She wasn't the only one trying to figure out what was going on. "I've been watching things unravel for months. And what I found, it doesn't just affect your marriage. It affects the entire family." My father finally spoke, his voice cracking. "You shouldn't have come here." But the visitor didn't flinch. "You left me no choice. You dragged me into this the moment you pulled me into your lies." My mind raced. Lies? Pulled into what? The situation was spiraling so fast it felt surreal. My mom, trying to piece things together, reached for the folder but stopped halfway, looking directly at the visitor. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me what he did." The visitor hesitated, then glanced at me before speaking. "This isn't just about broken trust. It's about someone else you don't know exists." The room went silent, completely silent. "Someone else?" My father's face crumbled at those words, and for the first time, tears filled his eyes. My mom's breath caught, her fingers trembling. The visitor leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "There's another person involved, and they're connected to you more than you realize." And with that one sentence, the entire story shifted again, revealing a twist none of us were prepared for. My mom's hand hovered over the folder as if touching it might confirm the fear already rising in her chest. My father looked completely defeated, shoulders slumped, eyes unfocused, like he was watching every mistake of his life catch up with him at once. The visitor sat still, waiting, giving him one last chance to speak before everything was laid bare. Finally, my father exhaled slowly and whispered, "I didn't mean for any of this to happen, but it's true." His voice shook, and he couldn't bring himself to look at either of us. "There is someone else, and it wasn't just a moment of confusion or weakness. It went on longer than it ever should have." My mom closed her eyes, and for a second, the entire room seemed to stop. Her pain wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, the kind of hurt that sinks deep and leaves bruises no one can see. But she forced herself to stay steady, to face the reality she had sensed for years. The visitor opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. Not of a person, but of a small child no older than 3. My breath caught. My father's hand trembled as he turned his face away, unable to confront the truth laid out in front of us. "This is the real reason I came," the visitor said gently. "Because that child deserves stability, deserves honesty, and your family deserve to know what's been hiding in the shadows." My mom stared at the picture for a long moment, her expression shifting from shock to heartbreak to something surprisingly calm. She didn't shout. She didn't break down. She simply whispered, "So this is what you couldn't say." My father finally looked up, eyes filled with regret. "I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to destroy everything." "But you already did," she replied softly. It felt like the final blow, the truth finally hitting all of us at once. The main conflict, years of doubt, distance, secrecy, was no longer a mystery. It was real, undeniable, sitting right in front of us in the form of a child who had no idea how many lives they were about to change. My mom took a deep breath, wiped a tear, and stood tall. "I need time," she said. "Time to understand what comes next. But I'm not running from this." For a moment, I thought that was the end of it, that the truth had finally settled. But then the visitor spoke again, hesitation returning to their voice. "There's one more thing you should know. Something he didn't tell me either." They reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a document with 2 names circled. My father looked confused now, truly confused. That child, the visitor whispered, might not be the only surprise in this story. And, just like that, the truth twisted again, leaving us on the edge of a new secret we never saw coming. My father stared at the document the visitor placed on the table, confusion tightening his face. My mom leaned forward, her eyes scanning the circled names. For a moment, none of us understood what we were looking at. Then slowly, painfully, clarity settled over the room. The document wasn't about another child. It was a record, proof that the person my father had been involved with had been hiding something too. The second circled name belonged to someone connected to her life, not his. It revealed that she had been misleading him as well, keeping her own secrets, creating a chain of misunderstandings that spiraled far beyond what my father ever realized. The visitor explained quietly, "She wasn't honest with you either. You weren't the only one she approached for help. You weren't the only one she relied on. You were tangled in something much bigger." They weren't trying to defend him, just offering the final missing piece. It softened the edges of the truth, not enough to erase the hurt, but enough to show that the situation was more complicated than it first appeared. My father lowered his head, relieved and ashamed all at once. My mom sat back, letting out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for years. She wasn't forgiving him, not yet, but she was no longer standing in a storm of unanswered questions. The truth was finally out, and clarity, though painful, brought a strange sense of quiet. In the days that followed, our home shifted into a place of slow healing. My mom took space for herself. She visited her sister, spent time reflecting, and allowed her emotions to settle instead of rushing toward any decision. My father, on the other hand, faced reality head-on. He reached out to the visitor, asked for updates, and promised to support the child involved. Not out of guilt, but because it was the right thing to do. He also began therapy, determined to understand how everything had spiraled so far. As for our family, we learned to sit together again, this time honestly. The envelope, the folder, the secrets, all of it became part of a chapter we didn't expect but ultimately grew from. There were no dramatic reunions, no instant forgiveness, but there was progress. And sometimes, that's enough. My mom once told me, families aren't ruined by truth. They're ruined by silence. And now, I finally understood what she meant. The surprise she revealed that day didn't destroy us. It exposed us. It forced us to face the things we'd been avoiding and make choices grounded in honesty, not fear. In the end, our family changed forever, but not in the way we feared. The truth broke us open, but it also made us stronger, wiser, and more connected than we'd been in years. And that became the real story behind the surprise that changed everything.